the small human in the Queen's court. The great hall of Zarnok Prime echoed with the sound of armored footsteps and buzzing energy lines that lit the tall silver pillars. Hundreds of alien warriors stood in silence, their eyes focused on the center of the room. The air felt tense, charged with judgment. At the very center sat Queen Valshira, ruler of the Zarnok Empire. She was tall, 8 feet of muscle, elegance, and pure power. Her golden armor shimmered in the blue light. Her sharp glowing eyes scanned the small figure standing before her throne. That figure was Ambassador Luke Hart, a human from Earth. He wore a simple navy blue suit, a translation device around his neck, and no armor. He looked tiny compared to the warriors around him, like a lamb standing before wolves. The Queen stood. "So," she said, her deep voice like thunder, "this is the human your council sends?" Luke looked up calmly. "I come in peace, Your Highness." Valshira laughed, a deep, echoing laugh that filled the entire court. "You come in peace?" she said, walking down the steps slowly. "You come with soft hands and soft words. And you ask me to join your little treaty? What can your kind offer?" Luke remained steady. "Mutual respect, cooperation, a better future." The Queen looked at her warriors, then back at him. "Do you know what your people suggested in their messages? That I share bloodlines with one of your kind? That I breed with a human?" She burst out laughing again. "Is this a joke?" Murmurs spread across the court. Luke's eyes didn't waver. "It wasn't a demand, just an idea to unite our species." Valshira stepped close, so close he had to look straight up at her like a tower. "You? Unite with me?" she asked, smirking. "You're not even as tall as my leg." Luke smiled. "That may be true, but strength is not only in size." That made her pause. The Queen raised one eyebrow. "Explain." Luke turned slowly, addressing the court. "Your people are strong, warriors, but Earth has strength of heart. We protect, we feel, and we never back down. Not even when facing something bigger than us." He looked back at her. "I came here knowing I might die, but I still came. That alone should speak something to you." Valshira's smirk faded just a little. She wasn't used to being spoken to like this, especially not by a small, soft-skinned man with no weapons. "You have courage," she admitted, "but courage is not enough to win respect here." She turned back toward her throne but stopped halfway. "If you want our attention," she said, "then survive the trial of strength. Win it, and maybe, just maybe, I'll listen to you again." The court gasped. Warriors whispered to one another. Luke frowned. "What does this trial involve?" Valshira smiled coldly. 3 tests, physical, mental, and moral. No weapons, no tricks, just you. And if you fail, your bones will rest under this very floor." Luke took a deep breath. "I accept." Later that evening, Luke sat in a cold steel chamber. A Zarnok guard placed a bowl of thick gray food in front of him. Max, the small Earth rover robot he had brought, rolled up and beeped. "I think I made her mad," Luke muttered. The robot blinked green and projected a hologram of Valshira laughing. Luke sighed. "She thinks I'm weak. That all humans are." He stared at the metal wall and clenched his fist. "But I'll prove her wrong." Far above, in her private chambers, Queen Valshira watched a screen replay of Luke's speech. Her expression was unreadable. "He did not tremble," she said softly. A female guard bowed behind her. "Shall we prepare the first trial?" Valshira nodded but didn't take her eyes off the screen. "Prepare it," she said. "But don't make it too easy." The guard raised a brow. "Do you wish him to succeed?" Valshira turned, her tone sharp. "No, I want him to be real. If he survives, it means he deserves to stand before me. If not, he dies as expected." But as she looked once more at the tiny human's face on the screen, his steady eyes, his calm voice, she felt something strange. A flicker, small, unwanted, but there. The challenge of the flesh. The next morning, the skies over Zarnok Prime turned dark. Black storm clouds circled the great arena. Thunder cracked across the sky, not from nature but from the drums of war echoing through the city. Inside the arena, thousands of alien warriors gathered to witness the trial of strength, a brutal tradition where honor was earned or bones were broken. At the center stood Ambassador Luke Hart, wearing only a protective chest plate and thin boots. He held no weapon. Around him, the floor shimmered with glowing blue lines. Zarnok trials were not just battles, they were rituals of spirit and pain. Queen Valshira stood high above in the royal viewing box. Her face was stone, but her eyes were locked on Luke. "Begin the first trial," she commanded. Trial 1. The beast of iron, a metal gate, crashed open. From the darkness emerged a massive creature, half beast, half machine, with silver armor plates and glowing red eyes. It let out a deafening roar, stomping its heavy claws into the sand. The crowd cheered. Many expected it to be over in seconds. Luke didn't run. He watched the beast carefully, calmly. Then, he ran toward it. Valshira narrowed her eyes. The creature swiped its claw. Luke ducked under and rolled to its side, grabbing a long chain that hung from its back. Using it like a rope, he climbed up the creature's spine, reaching its neck. With a deep breath, he yanked the chain around its front and locked it tight. The beast roared again, twisting wildly. But Luke held on. He didn't use strength. He used position, timing, strategy. After a minute of wild thrashing, the beast finally collapsed, wheezing. Silence fell over the arena. Then, cheers erupted. Valshira's eyes widened slightly. "He studied it," she whispered. "He found the weakness." Trial 2. The maze of Mind Luke was led into a dome filled with floating stones, spinning platforms, and glowing puzzles. Holographic illusions attacked his senses: fire, drowning, whispers of failure. In the center sat a riddle. One wrong answer would collapse the floor beneath him. Most warriors solved it with guesses, or brute force. Luke sat cross-legged. He closed his eyes and listened. He noticed the sounds weren't random, they followed a rhythm, a code. Earth music helped him understand it. He stood and placed his hands on 3 glowing stones. The dome stopped spinning. The path opened. The Zarnok engineers gasped. "He didn't fight the illusion," one whispered. "He read it like a book." Trial 3. The moral test. This time, the test was cruel. Luke was placed in a small room. 2 Zarnok children, both injured, were dropped inside with him. An AI voice boomed. "Only one exit will open. Save one, leave the other. Choose or fail." Luke stared at the 2 small figures. One groaned, the other cried softly. Outside, Valshira watched on screen. Most warriors failed this test. They either saved no one or sacrificed one without hesitation. Luke didn't choose. He ripped off his arm guard and used it to block the closing door. He then tore his shirt, tied it around one child's wound, and carried both children in his arms, crawling through the narrow exit. The crowd outside fell silent. No one had ever passed the final trial without letting someone die. As Luke stepped back into the light of the arena, bloodied, limping, but still standing, the arena roared with applause. Valshira rose from her throne slowly. He looked up at her, not smiling, just breathing heavily. She raised one hand. "The human," she said loud enough for all to hear, "has passed the trial of strength." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Warriors bowed their heads slightly. Luke remained still. Valshira walked down the steps until she stood before him again. This time, she did not mock his size. "You risked your life. You gave your strength. You saved the young," Luke replied, voice rough. "Not for your approval, because it was right." Valshira looked into his eyes. There was no fear, no begging, just truth for the first time in her life. She felt her pulse shift, just slightly. Later that night, alone in her war chamber, she reviewed the trial footage again. She zoomed in on his face, slowed the part where he shielded the children. She placed her hand against the screen. "He is different," she said to herself. Then she whispered a sentence she never thought she'd say. Maybe the bond wouldn't be such a curse. The unspoken bond. The moonlight above Zarnok was sharp and silver, falling gently on the stone balconies of the royal citadel. Most of the palace was asleep, warriors resting after the grand trial, servants cleaning, machines humming in the distance. But Queen Valshira stood awake in her private chamber, staring at the giant window that overlooked the city. Her armor was off for once. She wore only a light ceremonial robe made of fine black threads that shimmered like stardust. Her mind, however, was heavy. Below her in the guest quarters, Ambassador Luke Hart sat quietly, tending to the bruises on his arms. The trial had left him sore, but his heart was still calm. He had done what he came for, survived without violence, without pride. But something inside him had changed, and something inside her was stirring too. Valshira finally stepped out onto her balcony, her tall frame casting a long shadow. She touched her wrist and activated the private signal. Seconds later, a soft knock came from below. Luke stood there surprised. "You summoned me?" "I did," she said simply. He followed her up, silent but watchful. In her chamber, there were no guards, no weapons, just her and him. Valshira motioned to a small seat. "Sit." Luke obeyed but remained alert. "You impressed my people," she said after a long pause. "But more than that, you've unsettled me." Luke raised an eyebrow. "Unsettled?" She nodded slowly. "No one has ever passed all 3 trials like you did. No one has ever refused to choose death. Even my own warriors choose strength over compassion." Luke smiled lightly. "Maybe compassion is a kind of strength your people forgot." Valshira looked at him, long and hard. "Why risk so much for strangers?" she asked. "Even the children, they weren't yours, they weren't even human." Luke leaned forward. "Because I don't see species. I see life. If we only protect our own, we become monsters." Silence filled the room again, but this time it was different. Warmer. Deeper. Valshira stepped closer, her massive form towering over him, but her face showed no mockery now. Only curiosity. "You confuse me," she whispered. "A small man with no armor, no claws, yet you walk like a king." Luke chuckled. "You keep calling me small, but you keep looking at me like I'm something bigger." That made her pause and smile. Just barely. Then came a moment neither planned. She reached out, just for a second, and touched his shoulder. Her skin shimmered faintly where they made contact. A faint golden glow spread across her fingers. She pulled back instantly, eyes wide. "What was that?" Luke blinked. "I felt something too." Valshira stared at her hand. "That glow, it only happens when our bioenergy syncs. It's called a first touch. It's the beginning of a bond." "A bond?" Luke asked. "In our kind, it's rare. It doesn't happen through will, only instinct." Luke stood slowly. "And now that it's happened?" Valshira turned away, walking to the window again. "Now, it cannot be undone." The door suddenly slid open. One of her advisors entered quickly, bowing low. "My queen. The council has learned of the bond spark. They demand a hearing." Valshira's expression changed instantly. Stone again. "I'll handle them." The advisor glanced nervously at Luke, then left. Luke stepped forward. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." She faced him. "You didn't. You revealed truth, and truth always causes trouble." She paused, then added, "This bond, it's not complete, but if it deepens, they'll consider it treason. They still believe our genetics are sacred, that no outsider should ever mix with royal blood." Luke asked softly, "And what do you believe?" Valshira looked at him for a long time. Then, she whispered, "I don't know anymore." Later, Luke walked back to his quarters. The halls were dark, quiet, but his mind was loud with questions. He touched the place on his shoulder where she had touched him. It still felt warm. In her chamber, Valshira stood alone again. She looked at her hand, still glowing faintly, for the first time in her life. The mighty Queen of Zarnok felt afraid, but not of war, of wanting something forbidden. The night of the eclipse. The twin moons of Zarnok hung heavy in the sky, casting silver and blue light over the capital. The streets were quiet, but in the air, something stirred. Tonight was not just another royal ceremony, it was the eclipse of unity, a sacred night celebrated once every 5 cycles. Under the alignment of both moons, ancient lore said that bonds made by will, not war, would become permanent, unbreakable, spiritual. And tonight, Queen Valshira had invited a human to stand beside her. In the Hall of Echoes, a great circular arena made of crystal and black stone, glowing vines curled around the walls. Blue fire danced gently in the ceremonial bowls. At the center stood Valshira. She wore a long robe made of black silk and war sapphire, woven with silver lines that pulsed faintly. No armor tonight, only her real self. She looked fierce, powerful, bare. And beside her, walking through a line of curious onlookers and proud warriors, was Ambassador Luke Hart. He wore a tailored robe gifted by the Queen's handmaidens, simple but elegant. His heart pounded, not from fear but because he knew this moment meant more than politics. As he reached her, the Queen spoke softly. "You came." Luke nodded. "You asked." Her voice lowered. "This ritual is not just symbolic. If we complete it, the bond becomes real. The connection will be locked to the soul." Luke looked up at her. "Then let's not do it unless it's true." Valshira paused. The Queen, who had never asked, only commanded, took a breath. "Want truth, and I fear it." Luke stepped closer. "I don't." The music changed. The High Priestess stepped forward, holding the orb of alignment. A small glowing sphere said to respond to the heart's energy. It floated between them, colorless. "Place your hands together over the orb," she said. They obeyed. Nothing happened, at first. Then slowly, light stirred. The orb glowed red, then gold, then something new. A warm rose-colored flame, never seen before on Zarnok. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The priestess stepped back. "It is rare. It is not duty. It is not force. It is chosen." Valshira's eyes widened. "This bond chose us," Luke whispered. "Or we found it." Just then, the moons crossed perfectly overhead. The eclipse began. The firelight dimmed and the shadows stretched. Valshira looked at Luke, and for the first time, her voice shook slightly. "Say no now, and I will undo everything." Luke took her hands in his. "I've said yes from the beginning," and in that moment, beneath moonlight and legend, the bond sealed. A visible thread of golden energy formed between their chests, glowing softly before vanishing into their skin. The bar hall was silent. No one clapped. No one spoke. Not out of shame, but awe. Later that night, they stood alone on the Queen's balcony. Far below, the city lights sparkled. Valshira removed her ceremonial robe, now in a simpler outfit. She didn't speak like a ruler now. She spoke like a woman. "When I first saw you," she said, "I thought you were soft, fragile, temporary." Luke smiled. "And now?" She looked at him for a long time. "Now I think you are the first person who's ever seen me." They stood in silence. Then slowly she reached out. Her hand rested on his chest. His hand covered hers. Outside, the stars shifted. Inside, something deeper happened. No words, No grand gestures, just closeness, heat, a quiet joining not of bodies alone, but of stories, pain, hope. And in the hours that followed, the Queen of Zarnok, warrior, leader, and legend, allowed herself to feel something she never had before: tenderness. She didn't laugh at the idea of union now. She welcomed it, but far, across the stars, on a secret moon station, Zarnok High Council leaders watched the sacred broadcast. They saw the bond, the eclipse, and one of them whispered, "She has betrayed the bloodline. That child must not be born. The child that shouldn't exist." 3 weeks had passed since the eclipse night. Zarnok's capital still looked the same. Warships flying overhead, warriors training in steel courtyards, and citizens bowing at the Queen's image. But inside, the palace, everything had changed. Queen Valshira no longer saw things the way she used to. The golden thread of the soul bond still pulsed quietly in her chest. She could sense Luke before he entered a room. His thoughts, his calm, his worry, his heart. But something else had started. Something strange. Something growing. That morning, Valshira collapsed in the royal strategy room. She had been standing beside generals, giving orders, when her legs gave out. The room went silent. She clutched her stomach, pain spreading like fire through her veins. Luke rushed to her side. "Shira!" Medics arrived within seconds. They carried her to the healing chamber, scanned her body, and ran advanced blood tests. Few minutes later, the lead healer stared at the results with wide eyes. "This can't be right," he muttered. An hour later, Valshira opened her eyes. She sat on the healing bed, her skin pale. Luke sat beside her, holding her hand. The healer stood frozen. "Well?" Luke asked. The healer bowed his head. "She is pregnant." The air froze. Valshira sat still. "That's impossible. Zarnok females only breed through ritual approval. No bond with a human should allow this." The healer looked shaken. "There is no mistake. A hybrid is growing inside you, and it is stable." Luke blinked. "A child?" Valshira's eyes burned with confusion. This has never happened before, not in thousands of years. By nightfall, the news had leaked. The High Council summoned the Queen for an emergency session. When she arrived at the council tower, the elders stared down at her, not as leaders, but as judges. "You have defied our laws," one said. "You mixed royal blood with an alien species. The child must be removed." Valshira's eyes narrowed. "It is my child. It is a risk," another elder said. "No records, no research, no history supports this. You may die. The child may be dangerous." Luke stepped forward. "It's not a weapon, it's a life." The council leader raised a hand. "Your presence here, human, is already a disgrace." Valshira stepped between Luke and the council. "Speak against me again, and you'll find my disgrace wears a crown." Silence fell. An elder hissed. "Then prove the child is worthy. Face the ancient challenge. If you pass, the child lives. If you fail, both of you will be erased." Later that night, Luke found her staring at the stars from a high platform. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is my fault." "No," she replied. "This is our path." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we walk it together." She looked at him, softer than ever before. "Luke, I'm afraid." He had never heard her say that. He stepped closer. "Then I'll be your shield." Far across the city, soldiers prepared the arena. The ancient challenge would begin at dawn. The Queen would fight for her child's right to exist, and the Empire would watch. In the shadows, a secret message traveled through the stars. A rebel faction had learned of the pregnancy, and they were coming, not to witness, but to destroy what they believed should never be born. The Queen versus her Empire. The first light of dawn fell over the arena of Zarnok Prime, the Circle of Judgment. This was no ceremonial hall. It was built long ago for trials of blood and legacy. The stone floor bore the scars of old battles. Around it, Thousands of Zarnok citizens gathered in silence. All eyes watched as the gates opened. Queen Valshira stepped out, wearing no crown, no flowing robe. Only her black battlesuit scarred with age. Her face was calm, but her heart beat heavy. Inside her, the child kicked. But outside, her challenger waited, Commander Therax, her second in command. Once loyal, now chosen by the High Council to test her. He was taller than even Valshira, broad, brutal, and forged by war. He stepped forward, raising his massive spear. "You betrayed your people for a human." Valshira's voice was steel. "I followed what your kind fears, truth," Therax roared. "Then fall to it." The gong struck. The trial began. Sparks flew as spear clashed against blade. She ducked. His first blow countered, twisted. Pain flared in her side, but she hit it well. She had trained for this her entire life, but she was slower now. Heavy. Pregnant. Therax grinned. "You're weaker. The child already destroys you." She struck him across the jaw with a spinning backhand. "No, it makes me fight harder." The crowd gasped. Meanwhile, Luke watched from the royal box, fists clenched. He wasn't allowed to fight, but he couldn't sit still either. He turned to the high priestess. "Let me enter the ring. She won't survive like this." She frowned. "If you interfere, it becomes dishonor." Luke looked back at the arena. Blood had begun to drip from Valshira's mouth. "She's not just your queen anymore," he said. "She's the mother of something new. If that's dishonor, then your laws are already broken." He jumped the rail. The guards moved. The crowd shouted, but no one stopped him. Down in the circle, Therax raised his spear for the killing blow. Valshira tried to rise. Her arm trembled. "Any last words, Queen?" A loud thud echoed behind him. Luke landed in the ring, rolling, bruised, but standing. "Yeah," he said. "She's not fighting alone." Therax turned with a snarl. "You break our laws." Luke raised his fists. "You already broke your honor." Valshira looked at him through blood-stained eyes. "You fool." I said, "I'd be your shield," he replied. She smiled weakly. "Then let's finish this together." They moved as one. Therax swung wildly. Luke ducked and slammed a baton against his ribs. Valshira leapt, using her partner's back to push herself higher, landing a crushing blow to the commander's neck. He staggered, then screamed. The crowd gasped. Valshira seized the moment. With a shout that shook the sky, she lifted her blade and struck. Therax collapsed, unmoving. Silence. Then the High Council stood. One of the elders raised his hand. She disobeyed tradition. She allowed human help. This ruling is invalid. A voice cut him off. From the crowd, a warrior shouted, "No, she won because she chose strength and heart. That is leadership." Others joined. "She won. She is our queen. The child lives." Soon the whole arena echoed with cheers. Valshira stood over her enemy. Bloody, shaking, but undefeated. She turned to Luke. And in front of thousands, she dropped to one knee, not in surrender, but in unity. Luke knelt beside her. She whispered, "You saved more than me today." Later, they stood on the royal balcony. The sun was setting. The skies were purple and gold. Inside her womb, the child pulsed with energy, strong, growing, alive. Luke touched her hand. "They still fear it." "Let them," she said. "We don't rule through fear anymore." He looked at her. "What do we call her?" he asked. Valshira thought for a moment, then answered, "Hope." But far in the stars, a fleet of unknown ships moved through silent space, and deep inside one, a general said quietly, "The hybrid has survived. Begin the next phase." A new line begins. Time passed. The stars over Zarnok still burned bright, but something had changed forever. What once was a warrior world ruled by strength and silence now began to whisper a different kind of power. Life, choice, and something once unspoken. Love. And at the center of this new story stood Queen Valshira, strong and proud. but different. Changed. Inside the royal birth chamber, she lay still, her body glowing with deep blue light. Her breaths were slow. Pain danced through her muscles, like fire, but she made no sound. Beside her, Ambassador Luke Hart held her hand tightly. He had never seen her afraid. Not in war, not in trial, not even when the council threatened her life. But now, she was sweating, pale, and holding on with everything she had. A healer approached. It's time. Valshira looked at Luke. If I don't survive, he gripped her hand tighter. Don't say that. I must. No, he said firmly, because you will survive, and she will live, and everything we fought for will begin today. She stared at him, breathing hard. Then, the final contraction began. Outside the palace, the world waited. Crowds gathered in every city square. Hollow screens lit the sky. Soldiers stood still. Priests prayed. The Bond child, the first of its kind, was about to be born. The Empire held its breath, and then a cry. Sharp, bright, alive. The healer lifted a small child from a glowing womb. Her skin shimmered with soft lavender tones. Tiny streaks of gold marked her chest. Her eyes blinked open, and one was blue like Luke's, the other bright like her mother's flame. She is strong, the healer whispered. She is perfect. Valshira reached out, exhausted but smiling. The first real smile she had ever given in public. Luke placed the child into her arms. They both stared at her in silence, hearts pounding together. Valshira whispered, "She is everything they feared, and everything they need." Luke leaned closer. "She's the first of a new kind." The Queen looked at him. Then she must be protected. 1 week later, the Empire crowned its new line of unity. Valshira stood before millions, not in war armor, but in a silver robe of peace. Luke stood beside her, holding their daughter. The council knelt before her. The crowd chanted her name, not in fear, but in respect. And when she spoke, her voice rang out like thunder, but carried warmth it never had before. For ages we believed only blood and power made us strong. But now, I know truth. We are strongest not when we conquer, but when we connect. She raised her hand toward Luke and the child. This is no longer about one empire. This is the start of something bigger. A bridge between stars. A line born from courage and from choice. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Some laughed, some raged, but many, many hoped. Because for the first time in known history, a child had been born not from command but from love. Later, in the quiet of their private garden, Valshira sat on a bench. Her daughter slept in her arms. Luke sat beside her, tired but at peace. "She's perfect," he said. "She'll be hated," Valshira replied. "Then she'll be brave," he whispered. The Queen looked down at her baby girl, eyes soft. "She's going to change everything." Luke smiled. Just like her mother. But as the stars turned above them, far beyond their world, a silent probe floated into the black. It sent one final signal to an unknown force. Hybrid. Born. Line confirmed. Phase 2 begins. In a galaxy still wounded by fear, a new line had begun, and it would either save them all or burn the stars. The end.